The United States won the SheBelieves Cup during this international break, which shouldn't come as a surprise as they usually do win the competition. But something I find myself thinking about a lot while watching Emma Hayes' version of the team is how they feel different from previous iterations, and not necessarily in a bad or good way, just different. Hayes obviously inherited a mess of a team after the 2023 World Cup. The USWNT was in a weird transformational period where some of their best players were past their prime, and their young talent didn't have a lot of international experience and connection with each other because the team was just so stacked up to that point. US coach Vlatko Andonovski resigned after the World Cup disaster, and a few months later it was announced that Chelsea legend Emma Hayes would become the new manager of the United States women's national team upon the completion of the 2023-24 Women's Super League season. She took the reins right before the 2024 Olympics, and most of the stars in the 2019 World Cup were gone. Talent wasn't the issue, the team had up-and-coming stars. Hayes' challenge would be course-correcting and developing chemistry with players who have played with each other for like 2 years or less. And luckily for the US, Hayes was the perfect person for the job. If you watched Chelsea under the English manager, you would know that tactics aren't necessarily her strength, obviously. However, Hayes was able to build Chelsea into a dynasty because she knew how to get the most out of all her players on the pitch. Almost every player she touched became a star. Her other main strength at Chelsea was, of course, squad building and management. And all these skills translate well into international management. Sophia Smith, Mallory, Pugh, and Trinity Rodman were all highly regarded players, of course, entering the tournament. But aside from Pugh, who would later become Swanson, Rodman and Smith, who would later become Wilson, hadn't seen much international success. Well, you know what happened at the Olympics. Triple espresso was born as that front three was nearly unstoppable, putting 4 past Germany in the group stage. In a very ugly quarterfinal against Japan, Hayes' side found a way with Rodman scoring past the 105th minute mark, 1-0. The semifinal was also a pressure cooker, with Wilson winning the game against Germany in the 95th minute, 1-0 again. Then, of course, to round it all out, Mallory Swanson scored the lone goal in the gold medal match against Brazil. While Triple Espresso got all the attention, none of this would have been possible without the defense of Naomi Girma, Crystal Dunn, Tina Davidson, Emily Sonnet, and Emily Fox. And then, of course, the midfield with veterans Lindsay Huron-Heaps and Rose Lavelle. Hayes did what Vlatko and the previous USWNT sides couldn't: create a balance between the veterans and the future of the team. Yes, the United States isn't as free-scoring as it once was, but they win. And that matters in an era where international competitiveness is at an all-time high. I think one of the things that has struck me the most about Hayes' United States women's national team is how much she actually rotates. Not just on the field, but in call-ups. Like, for example, if you told me a few years ago that Loeo Labonta would start getting her first caps for the US in 2025 at the age of 32, I would not have believed you. In fact, just after a year with Hayes in charge, 24 players had earned their first cap with the United States. That is insane. Hayes manages to trust players who haven't played much for the national team, and also the youth. Wilson is still on pregnancy leave, and Hayes has put her full trust in 22-year-old Ali Sentnor at striker. Hayes is truly taking advantage of the NWSL. While she wasn't called up for the SheBelieves Cup, Hayes trusted Hal Hirschfeld to play center back in games this year, something she never does with the Washington Spirit. And I personally really like the strategy of getting younger players to camps, even if it is sporadically. Because again, we have seen what happens to US when younger players aren't properly integrated. It also makes the team less reliant on certain players. There has been no triple espresso available since the Olympics because of the injuries and Wilson and Swanson's pregnancies, yet the US are still playing as one of the best teams in the world. A central part of their backline, Crystal Dunn, retires? Easy. Center back Tara McCown, now Rude, was first called up last year under Hayes, and the 26-year-old has slowly become a central part of this defense next to Girma. The problem with the United States women's national team 2-3 years ago is that they didn't have any succession plans in place. Even with Mallory Swanson back when she was Mallory Pugh, she would get called up, but she would get very little playing time, and even time away from the team. Hayes' philosophy is that any of my players could hurt you, and it's working. Look at how young the starting 11 was against arch rivals Canada in the SheBelieves Cup. You have a 29-year-old Fallon Tullis-Joyce at goalkeeper, a 30-year-old Rose Lavelle, and of course a 32-year-old captain Emily Sonnet. But then you have the 21-year-old Alyssa Thompson linking up with her 20-year-old sister Giselle on the left-hand side, 22-year-old Sentner up on top, a 23-year-old Rodman on the right side, 27-year-old Sam Coffey accompanied by a 20-year-old Claire Sutton in the midfield, and then the slightly more experienced 25-year-old Gurma and 27-year-old Fox in the back. This is a great distribution of ages. Heaps wasn't even played until the 79th minute mark. However, it obviously hasn't been perfect. They did lose last year's SheBelieves Cup to Japan, who, to be fair, is pretty stacked as covered before. And they also lost to Brazil and Portugal all in 2025. But I'm not too worried about this because, again, Hayes was missing at least 2 of 3 of her best attackers, and 2025 was really a year for Hayes to get a handle on this team after the success of the Olympics. She was experimenting and was still learning. What gives me marginal worry, actually, is that, their football isn't the prettiest right now. That's just a function of Emma Hayes as a manager. You win, but it won't always look great. However, that can leave the door open for other nations to capitalize, obviously. However, I think you could say that about almost every top national team right now. Like, watching England and Spain this summer in the Euros left a lot to be desired from both. Neither team was just necessarily playing that amazingly. Hell, the Netherlands just drew to Poland. Now, I have been watching the United States women's national team for a very, very long time, and there is something I do miss. The team's identity as activists. This new generation of the team reaps the success financially that the old guard fought for, and that's obviously great. However, with the increased commercialization of the women's game, the players are a lot less outspoken on social issues. And I'm not criticizing the players for this necessarily, it's just something I did notice. And you really saw this divide with the Corbin Albert Schrader situation. Essentially, right before the SheBelieves Cup in 2024, young PSG midfielder Corbin Albert was exposed for reposting homophobic content on TikTok, advocating for conversion therapy. She also was caught liking an Instagram post making fun of legend Megan Rapinoe injuring herself in her final professional soccer game, which, bad move, especially when she's a player who has made the national team a better place for you, and you are wearing her number. Now, in the past, Albert would have been gone from the national team after this. Unfortunately, we are beyond the days of 10 lesbians and Alex Morgan, even though I miss that so much. Now, though, the team does seem to be less queer represented than in previous years, and the younger teammates' statements reflected this versus the veterans. A statement from Captain Lindsay Heaps and former player Alex Morgan read, "We just want to address the disappointing situation regarding Corbin that has unfolded over this past week. We've worked extremely hard to uphold the integrity of this national team through all generations, and we are extremely, extremely sad that the standard was not upheld. Our fans and our supporters feel like this is a team that they can rally behind, and it's so important that they feel and continue to feel undeniably heard and seen. We stand by maintaining a safe and respectful space, especially as allies and members of the LGBTQ+ community. This platform has given us opportunity to highlight causes that matter to us, something that we never take for granted." Again, this is the old guard from a team which was more visibly queer. Now, see if you can contrast this statement with what Trinity Rodman of the new generation said. "I like to say social media is a great place, but a dangerous place. Having strong opinions is difficult, especially when you're looked at a lot, and you have a platform to do so. Obviously, getting booed is horrible. Corbin Albert got booed at games after this. But there's people that have their opinions and have their beliefs, and they're not always going to match up with those. Even if you're in the spotlight, it doesn't mean you believe the same things as everybody else. But yeah, for us, she's on the US women's national team, and we're going to be her teammates and support her. When she comes on the field, she's like everybody else wearing that number and playing for our country, and she's working her butt off to do so. Well, you see, Trinity, her quote strong opinions directly hurt some of your other teammates, and that's a major problem. Now, obviously, people can grow, and Emma Hayes said that they're going to keep things internal with the Albert situation and address it behind closed doors. After an, half-hearted apology on Instagram, Albert continued to keep getting called up pretty regularly from PSG, albeit to boos at home and away games when announced either in the starting lineup or as a sub. And after being booed by 70,000 fans at Wembley in England, Emma Hayes actually said the fans could do what they want. She did not defend Albert. However, it wasn't over. You may have noticed that Albert isn't part of this SheBelieves Cup team that just won. In fact, she hasn't been called up in around a year. More specifically, her last camp was in May 2025. And part of this you can attribute to the fact that the US is stacked in the midfield. And that's definitely a contributing factor, but something else happened about a year ago. That summer after her final May camp, Albert got married to Colts kicker Spencer Schrader, whose most notable play last season was tearing his ACL. On her wedding post with Schrader, Corbin liked a homophobic comment. I am not kidding. So no, she didn't do what you say and learn from her mistakes and grow. She stayed the exact same. And again, we don't know exactly what happened, but Hayes most likely had a very short leash on Albert Schrader, and it's possible teammates were uncomfortable by her liking that message, obviously. This was her second chance. She was given it, and she squandered it. I think Hayes has shown good leadership since her appointment, and I do hope this is her standing on business. But I think it's fair to say that fans, especially ones who were there in the 2010s, were hurt by the younger players' statements, especially when comparing to veterans Morgan and Heaps' statement. And honestly, I think a lot of these fans have moved more towards the PWHL, the Professional Women's Hockey League in America, recently because the league more closely represents them than the current USWNT. So yeah, the United States under Emma Hayes is different, in both great and not so great ways. The rotation of players definitely feels more like a democracy and is less reliant on star power, and I really like that. However, it isn't always pretty, and many will miss the former identity of the team. One thing is for certain though, the United States has probably the greatest depth out of any national team right now, and Hayes is making the most of it. Their scheduling makes it hard to truly evaluate them though, because yes, they did win the Olympics in 2024 and did it pretty dominantly, but since then, I mean, their next 3 fixtures in a row are against Japan. And again, Japan is an amazing national team, but playing the same team 3 times in a row? Honestly, maybe you could argue the scheduling gives the team an element of surprise, because Europe now doesn't really have any friendlies due to the Nations League and long process of World Cup qualification. We just won't see many friendlies between the 2 continents in general because of Europe's schedule. So what do you guys think of Emma Hayes' national team? What have you guys noticed, and do you agree with me? Thank you guys so much for watching. These videos take a long time to make, so if you liked the video, liking it would be amazing, and subscribe if you want to. And I'll see you guys later.